Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. With elections coming up, some have brought some concerns they have. They feel the politicians and the potential candidates, many of them cannot be trusted in a lot of the promises they make. And they also are expressing here the disappointment and regret that they have of past elections that they have got involved in. And in the past they were told to vote for a particular party and that they were the best out of all the political parties. Yet they noticed that more harm came out. And many give examples of even other countries that Muslims were told, like when it came to the elections for Obama, people were saying Obama was going to be better than Bush. And when he took the office, we seen there was an uproar in the Muslim lands, and one conflict to another. The amount of issues that happened in the Muslim lands during the era of Obama, many scholars came out and attested that more harm and less peace came in the Middle East during his time. And both, in the eyes of the people, were considered to be not in the favor of the Muslims' interest over there. Also, with the same with Donald Trump. From 2016, Muslims came out and said, I'm Muslim, I'm going to vote for you. And when during that term, we've seen what he done in terms of the capital of Jerusalem, how he went about with it. And also with Britain, the Labour Party, more than 64% of Muslims voted for them. And later on, many Muslims were regretting. So a lot of Muslims are confused. Is this something that they should be so much involved in because of the amount of disappointments they've seen?
Mr. President, one thing that the Democrats keep sending to our communities to scare them that you will come and deport them, although some of them are second and third generation immigrants. So I want you to respond to these accusations and fear delivering to our community. What would you say? Fake news.
And you can now see that totally what was promised, the opposite occurred.
Some of the President Trump's plan to take over Gaza is causing mixed emotions, you might say, for some of the Arab Americans who voted for him. Now, some of those voters are in Dearborn, Michigan, which has the largest Arab American population in the United States. In 2024, they flipped to President Trump, partly to protest President Biden's handling of the crisis in Gaza. CBS News National Court.
And with that, the condition in Palestine, it became worse, and the world is witnessing that. And many of these voters who voted feel like they were part of that problem because they voted and got involved, and they feel this remorse now. So there was a lot of wordings, like Donald Trump, when he said to Habib mentioned to him, I know you will stop the war in Palestine. And Donald Trump replied, we will stop it. I will stop the war. And we've seen that the condition there has worsened. And he has plans that is not in the favor of the Palestinians. So there's a lot of disappointments that occur in these elections. For example, in November 2019, Dr. Haytham al-Haddad in Britain said, I believe that every single Muslim is obliged to register to vote. And he said less than 5 hours remaining. And then 2023, after voting for certain MPs and people, 5 pillars, they came out on their Twitter and they said the British Muslim MPs either voted against a ceasefire in Gaza last night in Parliament or abstained. And this is sometimes the disappointment that people are talking about.
This is what made him uneasy, staying in the comfort zone for years. He keeps screaming and shouting for Palestine. As soon as they get the position, no more actions. We need to...
So here, an imam from Australia, some days ago, he mentioned that a lot of the candidates, they come out and scream that they're going to work in favor for Palestine. And he said, as soon as they get into office, we don't see that.
That been a realization that you just don't feel either candidate is supporting your best interests?
Absolutely. So as a Palestinian, I'm absolutely very adamant about not voting for people who have been complicit or contributing to the genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. So that's definitely a huge thing for me. But as you mentioned, unfortunately, the other option isn't great either.
With the most Muslim households and going door to door to find the many in the community who don't vote.
Canadian Muslims are passionate about the very same issues as their neighbours, but for whatever reason on election day, you just don't see the turnout that you should.
How many voters do you have in your household?
Apathy, distrust, ignorance, typical factors play into one of the lowest voter turnout rates among faith groups in Canada. It's about 30%. But volunteers say.
And so this is the reality. Muslims, they've seen many of the results of these elections and how these candidates are. For example, the Liberal government, just look at their voting record on Palestine, the United Nations. They were basically continuing the Harper government's legacy. In 2011, Canada broke the tradition and voted against several resolutions it had previously supported, both under Conservatives and Liberals, and abstained from another. These resolutions include self-determination for Palestinians, they vote against it, condemnation of Zionist settlements, the applicability of the Geneva Convention to the occupation, the right of Palestinian refugees to their property, assistance to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Agency, and the condemnation of the occupation of the East Jerusalem. Until 2019, it took the Liberals to reverse on just one of the resolutions. And also 2024, a couple of more. Here, a journalist, Palestinian writer based in Toronto, originally from Nablus. He's been active in the Arab community. He says many Palestinians and Arabs and Muslims have completely lost hope in both parties, or even the system altogether. They're now unlikely to allow politicians from these parties into their midst, and certainly will not welcome them into their places of worship and homes. They have a right to feel this way. At this point, it would be dangerous to believe any federal government will take principled actions on Palestine without a real imposition of the will of Canadians to make them do so. Like, for example, some of the past elections, from the request of the Muslims to vote for Trudeau, is that he reverses Bill 21, Quebec, regarding the hijab, so on. And then later on, after he took office, comes on the CBC News, year 2021, Trudeau says he won't step into Bill 21 debate to avoid triggering the affair with Quebec.
Daily talking about Palestine.
We've spoken rightfully a lot about anti-Semitism, but what about the rights of the Palestinian people? And I want to hear what you guys think of that.
We can stand up and we should stand up for Palestinian rights. And that can perfectly well be done without being anti-Semitic. These two things are not in conflict, and the suggestion that they are is just wrong, I think. But you're absolutely right to raise this, because we do have a dispossessed Palestinian people, and we have an insecure Israel, and I don't think anybody can pretend that this is a state of affairs that is possibly right in the world, and we need to do something about it.
Standing up for the rights of...
And then you can see afterwards.
So one of the first consuls in Russia stand up, and we did the ceasefire. So if you put that on the record on the Russian consul. Yeah, but your leader. We need our models and principles.
And so the same person who said he was going to do something about it voted against it. And even requested from the MPs to abstain, many of them at the first time of it.
Understand Muslims for Trump. How about that? Muslims for Trump. And it's become a big movement in Michigan, a beautiful movement. And you know what they want? They want peace. They really do. They don't want to be in wars. They're very smart. And you know, it started off as a little thing, and it's grown and grown and grown. And now we have a much bigger vote than they do. Can you believe that? Because they said these people are stupid. All they want to do is, they didn't know what to do. Actually, they were in between, and she has no idea. She doesn't know where the she is. She can't. And they liked me, and I like them. And let me just tell you, they want peace. They don't want to fight. And they're not involved in the terror and all the things.
So those are the words for you before, and now we see after.
The elections in Canada are well underway. And Canada's going through it. With a crumbling healthcare system, skyrocketing cost of living, homelessness everywhere. There's one thing you can count on: our politicians sucking up to Israel. Let's examine the options, shall we? First up, the Conservatives.
Mais UNRWA, dont au Gaza, le gouvernement libéral continue de financer UNRWA. C'est un organisme dont on a trouvé des membres.
Yeah, none of that was ever proven, but good to know that Pierre Poilievre is unapologetically pro-Zionism over anything else. Let's move on to the Liberals. Surely they have been better since the departure of Trudeau.
We need to see ceasing of the levels of violence.
Yeah, and he's to cease to be president.
What were you being aware of? Are you conceding it's a genocide in Gaza? I didn't hear that. Actually, I didn't hear that word. You were there, I guess. And, yeah, so it's noisy. You get if you're up there, you hear snippets of what people say.
Here we have Mark Carney, the unelected Prime Minister of Canada, and he moonwalked back his statements on there being a genocide in Gaza, which the highest UN courts have agreed to and found Israel guilty of. And then he said that Canada has an arms embargo on Israel, which they should under international law, but then he walked that back as well. And he was kind of sternly talked to, in a tweet, in a post on X, by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has a warrant out for his arrest. We shouldn't be lecturing anybody about anything. But nothing new here. That is just your typical liberal. Moving on to the NDP, I am sure they are much better. After all, the NDP actually called for a ceasefire and for peace. But then you realize the NDP are terrible. They have no backbone. When their own nominees, people like Tammy Jakeman, compared what Israel is doing to Palestinians in Gaza to Nazi Germany, which is literally agreed to and agreed upon by Holocaust survivors, by a huge number of Jewish groups who are anti-apartheid, anti-genocide, anti-Zionism. But the NDP have no backbone, and what did they do? They got rid of Tammy. Rana Zaman as well, a personal friend of mine. We have gone to countless rallies and protests together. She was the NDP nominee. She won the nomination in Dartmouth Cole Harbour. Rana compared what Israel is doing to Palestinians to Nazi Germany and concentration camps, Auschwitz, which, by the way, again, many Holocaust survivors, many Jewish groups, independent Jewish voices, for example, agree with this. And the international community, human rights organizations agree with this. But the NDP does not. So they got rid of her too. And by the way, to show you how bad it is, the NDP is actually using and applying the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which equates criticizing Israel with anti-Semitism. Israel with Judaism. This is opposed by the vast majority of the world, but the NDP is fine with accepting them. Oh boy. So finally, who's left? We got the Green Party. Let's see what they got. Blow me away.
So this adds to what many scholars have been saying for some time, like Sheikh Abdul Abbad, Sheikh Albani, and his latter statements, that a person should abstain because of all this confusion, and to know that the real relief for the Palestinians is turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, creating our own awarenesses on the media, taking our own methods. Because sometimes you don't know who's who, and it can create a greater harm. It's a lot of risk in it, and a person doesn't get involved. Because this ruling of taking lesser of two evils is when you're certain, they say, as it applies. But people are not certain. Another thing to add, the Muslims are divided amongst themselves. And even with the voting, and these elections further divide them, which caused another issue.
The vote of the Muslim community in France is not homogeneous, and they don't vote in one block in favor of somebody. There is few millions of voters, and the few millions, they have general tendencies, but they vote for everybody.
And even the kuffar, they know the divide amongst the Muslims. You can hear on Sky News some days ago.
And yet, Christy, that is what an imam said after a public meeting. I've seen the pictures of the crowd, and I've seen others say it too. There's even an imam in Sydney saying, don't vote, it's not Muslim. This is really quite concerning. And there's the Muslim vote movement as well, saying vote on the Palestinian issue. I mean, this is not healthy.
Nashad gets to speak and Michelle does not. Now, this is for the Sugarland City Council mayor race, and I'm like, all right, well...
This is at Masjid Sabirin.
That's not allowed. As a 501c3 organization, every candidate has to be allowed to speak. You can't pick and choose, otherwise you risk...
In one masjid alone, they're divided amongst themselves on the candidates. Some people, members of the community, want someone else, and others want this person. Like here at this masjid, they're saying that this person is a pro-Zionist, another one is claiming to be a pro-Palestinian, and they're having an issue amongst themselves at one mosque.
Losing your C3 status. So I go inside and I talk to Fawad Kochinwala, and I said, hey, there's a candidate outside, can she speak? And he was like, yeah, sure, just bring her in. And I was like, all right, cool, yeah. Then I go outside. As I'm, there, the cops are escalating what's happening with Amna.
She was speaking loudly to the men, telling them one of the candidates who was there that was speaking had actively silenced our voices at City Council, that he had allied with Zionists. Then I saw the police approach her very quickly. I was concerned that the police were going to get aggressive, and so I went over to make sure that Amina was okay. At that point, I heard the police officer say she was trespassing, to which she responded,
I'm an ISGH member, I don't have to leave. And then the cops kept insisting, well, they want you gone. And I said, who wants me gone? He kept saying, they want you gone. And I was like, who? Let me speak to the AD. And you will have to arrest me, but I will not leave because this is my masjid. Right when I said that, the cop next to me, he's like, okay, well, you're under arrest. And he grabbed my hands and he put the cuffs on me.
At that point, this is by instinct, I just reached.
So this is what it leads to. Muslims dividing like this and using the authority on one another at the house of Allah for these topics of elections.
My hand out to grab Amina's arm because I obviously did not want her to be arrested. And then the police looked at me and said, I will arrest you as well if I tried to interfere with the arrest. And it was at this point that thankfully we had some other people who were speaking up and trying to de-escalate the situation.
You know, if they're doing good work for the pro-Palestine movement, you know, them being in jail does not help anybody right now. And so my priority at that point was to make sure that they did not get arrested.
We were able to tell the police officer that we would comply, that Amina would leave. And at that point, he removed the cuffs.
And so once the officers, you know, take the handcuffs off, you know, one guy in a white shirt was like,
I'm the manager. I didn't say anything. I didn't say arrest her. You don't get to tell me to arrest her. I don't need you to. Yeah, well, I'm one of the management here. Okay, well, someone else told him.
The cops pointed to two specific individuals, a guy named Tamim and a guy named Wahab. They were saying, you know, they gave us permission, but then when we spoke to them, they said, no, we didn't say arrest her. We said, you know, tell her to get off the property. And so, yeah, I truly don't know if they're lying here, like if Tamim or Wahab are lying, or if the cops are lying. But what I do know is that the cops did escalate that much faster than it had to be.
And the only reason I was there so proudly, like this much emotion, was thinking that I am safe in this space. This space is my space. I cannot be arrested in my masjid.
So after Amina is uncuffed and I'm assured that she's okay, the man who invited me to come speak came up to me and said, hurry, go into the room. They've changed their mind. Now you can go speak. At this point, Juma prayer was long over. The two male...
They changed their mind. That first they said that she can't speak. She's not allowed. She shouldn't be speaking. And then later on they allowed her.
Male candidates had already said their piece and were outside. But I ran as fast as I could into the women's section and I was allowed to speak from the mic for a minute. At that point, the worship center was pretty empty because most people had already left by then.
Then one brother said to me, why were you being violent? This is not the way to talk. You should go inside and talk to this city council member. And then I was trying to explain myself that I had been doing that for 15 months at city council every other week. And I want the Muslim community to remember that I was safer in a space that was not mine. But I was unsafe in a space that I had every right to be in.
So this is from the negative effects of these elections. Another example.
Our Prime Minister of Canada will be speaking to us. If everyone can please sit down, everyone, just relax. We're all going to have a chance to meet the Prime Minister. We are pleased to have the Prime Minister here. The Prime Minister has been a good friend to the Muslim community of Canada. He's been making fun of Muslims all year.
And you can see the divide. And this, you can see the reactions of certain Muslims regarding some of the politicians of the past. And this is happening at IMO at the mosque.
The Prime Minister has a difficult situation in which he is dealing. It's a shame that you would allow. As well, we have the Prime Minister here. We have ministers of the Crown here. We have MPs here. It's a shame. We ask all of you. We ask all of you to listen to him. You should take your people. And if you want, please engage in dialogue, because dialogue is important, not yelling at each other. Please help us welcome the Right Honourable guest, you're not respecting the guest more than anything else. Listen first.
And this is happening at the house of Allah. And it places the house of Allah for worship, not for these political campaigning and arguments, and one Muslims are on one side and others. This is what's going to create. It's going to create a further division. The mosques are a place for unity, for worship, to worship Allah together in tranquility. And here, some days ago on the news,
meanwhile, the Greens are going flat out getting the vote of Muslim clerics, who apparently think that this election in Australia is actually all about Palestine, which doesn't allow elections, by the way, and that is the one issue that Muslim voters in Australia should consider. I'll show you an imam who is supporting a Greens candidate in Melbourne.
I was, honoured to be joined by my dear sister Samantha, who has been speaking up about Palestine and justice for Palestinians. The seat of Wales is a major opportunity for us to end the domination of the two major parties. Now we have to have a person that has been standing for the values that we practice in our religion, which is justice for Palestine and Palestinians. Please support Samantha.
Gemma, I have to say, I find that rather threatening, where this election suddenly becomes about a territory, a war-torn territory on the other side of the world.
Yeah, look, it's not. I don't think that's. I don't think that is. My take on it was I didn't feel threatened, but I would say maybe a little bit concerned, but not because of what the gentleman said. Australia is a free country, and you're quite right. The Palestinian territories, the disputed territories, are not free. They don't have elections there. And I just want to point out to the Imam, should he be a Sky viewer, Andrew, that I don't think the Greens do celebrate and support the same values that most even moderate Muslims would hold around sexuality and same-sex marriage and gender diversity.
So here, they're pointing out that maybe they might agree with you on something about Palestine, maybe with wordings at the beginning, but with a lot of the other policies, it doesn't agree with Islam. There's a lot of other topics.
Pretty sure there'd be a fairly swift intersection or a clash of beliefs where that's concerned. But I have faith that the Australian public, the general voting public of Australia, look at that and go, actually, no, we're not deciding the future of our country based on a foreign conflict. We want to be able to send our kids to school, pay for a holiday, pay a reasonable amount for our groceries, our fuel, our cost of living. That is what...
So this is for the upcoming elections, Australia. Some of the Muslims there are stating that they're looking for someone who is going to be in favor of Palestine. And in reality, they all have similar speech at the beginning, even the conservatives. I'll show you here that the conservative even say that they want a Palestinian state.
And we on the global stage, we will always be a voice for peace. We do believe in the eventual creation of a Palestinian state living in peace next to a Jewish state. That said.
So you can hear all parties basically say that. They want a Palestinian state. They want peace. And as for maybe the NDP may say a little bit more, but they say right now the Liberals are at 43%, Conservatives are at 40%, the NDP is probably at 8%. They're saying the election is between Liberals and Conservatives. And you're basically wasting your vote for NDP. And all of them have what we mentioned. So to use this and say this one is against a Palestinian state and this one is, it's not correct. They're both, and they both want peace, but they also each have their own issues. And this is what's creating the confusion for a lot of the Muslims. So for this reason, we take the advice of our scholars, what they were pointing out. And that's these campaigning and these elections have more harm than good. And that a Muslim shouldn't be involved in this because it creates what happens now, or what we see. Like, for example, you can hear what happened some months ago in the UK.
I am the example. This is my home.
A politician or a candidate at a mosque, and they tell him to kick him out.
Okay, that's fine, no problem. No, you can't take my leaflet like that. Can you take a video? You cannot take a video like that. You cannot take my leaflet like that. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. You cannot. I live down here. I am the local candidate. You cannot do that. You cannot do that. If they can give a leaflet, I can give the leaflet. I have the right.
Get away from the mosque, cuz.
No, then why are you allowing others?
You're reformed, though.
Yes, what is the problem? Reform is the party of this country. What are you talking about?
Just don't block the road. You can do whatever you want.
Reform is the party for the common sense, everyone. You have to understand it.
Clear, yeah?
Yeah. We have been fooled for so long. Reform, it is the party of this country.
Clear, yeah, clear.
Yeah, I am your local candidate. I live down here. Don't believe all these leftists. They are destroying our country. I am the hard-working person. We are being Muslim. We've been fooled so many times.
So watch this.
Shut up and listen, please. Give me the respect. I give you the respect.
Okay, yeah, MP is at a Labour MP is at a mosque and he's telling the people, shut up and listen.
Just listen. No. You don't read anything. The problem with people are that they're ignorant. The problem is that people are ignorant. The problem with people are that they are ignorant. The problem with even in the house of God, you're ignorant. And that's the problem. You are doing what you're doing is wrong. And what we don't want to do is order to look at what we've done again. The big problem with our community is illiteracy, because they're not able to read what's in front of them.
On the other hand, we have imams that dedicate their Friday khutbahs mainly about elections.
The Imam of Darul Hijra Islamic Center used his Friday sermon to encourage worshippers to go out and vote.
The topic was encouraging people to vote and also to understand, especially the people of color, the Somalis, East African, to know and understand the long history of the battle of voting right. And my topic was today the importance of the voting.
Sharif is among the faith leaders in Minnesota who is using ceremonies to get people to the polls. He said emphasizing voting participation fits with the general concept of the mosques. In this polarized time, Sharif told his congregation that voting is the only way to make a change and to be heard.
The only way to create a change, that's what they say. While we have here even clips of Imam saying they've been voting for 40 years. And what changes? And we've seen things gotten worse. And another thing is, every year we hear a new excuse to get the Muslims to vote. One, in the past election, it was because of, they were saying the increase of Islamophobia. They said that Canada, in the last 5 years, has a greater increase of Islamophobia than any G7 country. So for this reason, we need to vote. That's one reason. Another reason, another election, they came and they said due to the topic of sex education being introduced to the schools, and this affair, that affair. And every year we hear something new of what they mention, and this year is about Palestine. Also, before that was about Bill 21. And we find that some of these things, they're still there, like what people are telling people to vote for, against, or vote for this candidate to go away. These problems are still there. Perhaps it has gotten worse. And here a person once commented and said, sometimes the evil that people may be voting against may be somewhat good to the Muslim from a different angle that brings overwhelming benefits to the Muslim community. Here he says, I remember the year sex education was being introduced to the public schools. Islamic schools were being filled with Muslim students from public schools, to the point people started to open more Islamic schools, and many parents resorted to private tutoring, homeschooling, and some resorted to different resources for online learning. Also, many parents began to reassess what their kids are learning at public schools. So recently, some have created an online platform to show the candidates that you should vote for because of their stance on Palestine. Despite they may have other stance regarding other Muslims that are suffering in different parts of the world, but we're going to merely forget about all that, and just because they agreed to a particular affair in Palestine with the words at the moment, and then when they get in office, who knows if they will follow up or even have a change or impact. But we're supposed to vote upon that premise. That's what they're mentioning. And then sometimes, from what we see, is that they bring a female candidate to the men's side to give a sermon, probably on Jum'ah, on the men's side. And we know the houses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are segregated. This is not the atmosphere. You shouldn't be doing this. And this is a place of worship. The men and women are segregated. And this, if she can come, she can go to the sister's side, or she can meet with certain figures of the community. It's not necessary to speak in front of everyone like this. Like even when they contacted us, we told them like the conservatives contacted us, we told them we're conservative like you in terms of our religion. So we don't have creators on Jum'ah. It's a different atmosphere. It's a place of worship. But you can meet with some of the members of the community, the figures of the community in the office, and we can speak there. So we gave them a timing, and we spoke. It's not necessary for them to. The word shows that they have to have that. And they have their platforms, their places where they can address people. It's not necessary for a female candidate to come in front of everybody on Jum'ah or on Eid and to give her a sermon. And to take time from the Eid khutbah or the Jum'ah khutbah to hear her. So currently there's a number of organizations that are specifically been set up to get Muslims to vote. So if you're going to see, there's a lot of these messages and using emotional tactics and trying to make you feel guilty if you don't. And some organizations, and some of these organizations, there's a lot regarding some of their interests and what they have and some of the agendas and the motives. Not all of them, but some of them. And some of them are teamed up with other organizations. So it's good to follow up on what's this big push, and is there a huge positive outcome, and what do our scholars say? If you go abroad and from a lot of the Middle East countries, they advise of not taking part in these elections. And even in Muslim lands, and they've been advising for some time because they've seen, like Algeria, there was a time where some scholars permitted it, but when they won, they did a takeover over them the next day, and it led to bloodshed and massacres and demonstrating. And after that, and we know it's even in Somalia for so many years, that there was the way they would elect or choose a leader is through shura, how initially it was in Islam, and it should be as the affairs that they have mutual consultation with the great leaders of the community, those people who are representatives, the tribe leaders, the regional people who know and representing, they all meet and decide who's best and look into the matter. This is from one of the ways. That's how Somalia was doing it for so long. Both Somalia and Somaliland, they were doing that. And then they started to take in this approach of the democratic elections. And it started to create this hostile atmosphere, especially on elections day. If you go there during elections times, there was a time period I was there and I witnessed the police have to use their arms and to fire. And it got to that level of aggression. And it could even lead to attempts of assassination. This very hostile, and this for this reason, the scholars don't advise with it because it comes with so much. Like here's a fatwa of Sheikh Abdul Abbad, where he's asked that should they vote, and from the angle of lesser of two evils, he says never. He stays away from all of them. And then he also said he should not vote for anyone, and the fact that they become safe from the harm of all of them is more preferable, and likewise they themselves become safe from harm. And this is a ladder of a lot of the opinions of a lot of scholars after seeing the truth in the matter of the harm and the so-called claim of lesser of two evils. So be careful of some of these da'is that come out and tell you they're doing it from the angle of lesser of two evils. You find out that this is not the case. Sometimes we're creating more problems in the community. We already have a greater divide, we're creating more problems. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us all and to make us of those who hear speech and follow the best of it. Barakallahu feekum.